All right. Well, Stacey, you want to take it away?
Always. Okay. Let me look at I have my lyrics printed here. Dun, 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 dun. Welcome to the Showrunner Show. It's an awesome place to learn some shit you should know. It's the Showrunner Show. It's the Showrunner Show.
That's pretty good.
It's fun because it had a swear in it. Let's people know we're cool.
We really earned the explicit for that one.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Showrunner Show, where every week we demystify some aspect of the job of showrunning for anyone who works in TV or wants to work in TV or just wants to know how it's all made. I'm Drew Dowdle.
I'm John Eric Dowdle.
And I am Stacey Shabosky. We're so glad you're here. And before we introduce this week's topic, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. We have all these iterations we haven't mentioned. We have a website, www.theshowrunnershow.com, and there you can find links to our Instagram page and our TikTok page and our YouTube channel, which is quite fun because I don't know if our listeners realize this, we are spectacularly good looking. It's actually held us back, like Margot Robbie. It's been really challenging for us to overcome our good looks. So go see this. And you can guess in the comments section, you can guess which one of us is tallest, which one of us has the biggest teeth, and which one of us is generally the best dressed. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
So this week, we're talking about what to expect in your first pitch. You know, the pitch process is like one of the most important parts of the process of getting a TV show made. And so we wanted to do a kind of pitch series, you know, talking through all the ins and outs of the process, what's worked for us, what hasn't. Some of you listening have never pitched to a studio or network, and this will, you know, probably be very helpful to you. And some of you have. We hope to provide some value to both. Just perfect. You know, with our experiences.
I think some people will be surprised to even learn that you have to pitch. They might be like, no, but I wrote the pilot. Somebody will just read that pilot, right? And it's like, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe just taking a step back, too, and saying what is involved in the pitch. I think, you know, some people have a pilot script that they're pitching and that the people in the room have read, you know, before they take the meeting. That's one version, but oftentimes there's not a script and you're pitching the story kind of from soup to nuts right in the room. And they don't know, you know, much other than a headline about the story before you come in. So sometimes, you know, things are sold pre-script, which can be very favorable because you don't have to spend all that time writing the script, but it also kind of keeps it a little bit more of an open field, I think. You know, when you sell an idea or a story or in a pitch, the network and studio has some, you know, input before this, you know, before you're putting pen to paper and, you know, doing that draft, which you'll often have to, you know, do a pretty heavy rewrite anyway after you sell a script.
Drew, there's also an in-between of, it could be that you don't have a script, but you do have intellectual property. So you might be going in with a great idea and a series of articles or a book or a podcast or something like that they might have, you know, glanced through some of those materials or not.
Yeah.
Or it might be their intellectual property. Like our first movie we got was the movie Quarantine, and that was based off the movie Wreck, which was a Spanish film that the producers had the rights to. And so we were actually pitching them, we were selling them something they owned. You know, that if they didn't, you know, like our pitch, you know, we get nothing.
A good point. In that case, you're actually pitching yourself for what they already, you know, so sometimes you're pitching an idea that you have or you and your producers have. Sometimes you're pitching yourself to be the one, hey, you want me to be your writer or director for this.
Yeah, you're pitching your execution of this material if they own it. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, this is, you know, for me, one of the things that I found surprising over the course of this was I love writing. That was what made me want to, you know, get into this business, is that love of writing, the love of cinema. And then at some point it's like, oh no, like you have to be good at pitching. And in fact, I would venture to guess that, you know, that writing and pitching might be equally necessary for having a real career. Like to convince people that this is a show worth doing, that you are someone, that they should employ to do it. Like that's a big part of it. And if that makes you nervous, that made me nervous too. Like I am not a public speaker. I'm not, pitches cost me, Drew and Stacy will tell you, like I get very nervous before them and during them. I've had panic attacks in pitches. And it's horrible.
True story. Yeah.
True story. Drew at this point knows my panic face. When I have my panic face, I shoot him like he's like, wide-eyed look, and he knows that, that means John's, floundering. I got to pick up the ball and run with it. And,
it is stressful. It's very stressful. I mean, you walk into a room with, big time execs. There's usually a lot of them, or, 5 or 6 of them. And it's you kind of have at that buyer, you have one shot, and they're looking for every reason possible to say no. You kind of go into it knowing that that's the mentality of the networks. And it's not because they're mean and cruel. It's that, they're hearing pitches all day long and, all the time, and they need to be really selective. They need to feel really, certain that when they say yes, that they really mean it. So they're kind of, they're geared towards looking for that one thing that you say that is the thing that's a reason to say no. And that is therefore very stressful.
I never thought of it that way. You think that's true? That's so
I do.
sad.
Yeah, I do. I know. You think like
I thought it was like they want to say yes,
shifts.
and they'll be like, shit, another no. Oh, crap,
you almost
another
have
no.
to like convince them beyond any doubt that it's a yes, versus, I think just due to the volume, they're not looking at like, I could see, with a few changes, how this could be a great show. It's just easier to say no because they'll hear 10 more tomorrow. And I think that's the reality.
yeah. Well, and they'll never get in trouble. They'll never fail saying no. You know what I mean? Like, so what? Like you bring in a show and they say no and it turns into the, Yellowstone. You know what I mean? The next big thing. Nobody's going to be like, wait, did you hear that pitch? Why didn't you buy that pitch? Whereas if they buy something that turns into a fiasco, like a money pit, and, the partners are terrible and all that, like, then they get in trouble. So it's always easier to say no, but at the same time, they're all looking. The reason they're hearing pitches is because they are looking. They are looking for things to buy.
Yeah.
They are looking. They have a problem. They have slots in their schedule to fill, and you can be that solution. And, it takes like over the course of time, like I've studied sales, from Zig Ziglar to Tony Robbins to, or like read, a bunch of Seth Godin and, marketing and sales and just trying to get into the mentality of that. I've done Toastmasters. I've, what I mean? I've taken acting classes, to just try and get over some of that. And I feel like that stuff helps and it's a part of the craft. Like I got into writing because I'm an introvert. I'm not like somebody who wants to, pontificate in front of lots of people. I mean, though I'm kind of doing that right now, but it's private. It's just me and Stacey and Drew here, like in my experience here.
Right.
But then to do that, to be forced to sell, is tough. And I just figured like it might be nice just talking through what a pitch is, what the experience is like.
I think we should do that. Before we jump into that, I'd also like to do more of a big picture thing, which is to say, sometimes you can go in to do a pitch and you don't get that job, but they remember you. And even right in the room, they could say, well, have you thought about that? They can pitch something right back to you. You go, you try to sell something, it might not work, but then they say, hey, we've got something, blah, blah, blah. They tell you about their property that they own. Say, could you be interested in something like that? So sometimes you go into the room for one thing and you end up leaving, deciding to collaborate on something else, or at least to give it a try. And before you mentioned, sometimes you go and you try to do a pitch, they don't sell it, you end up going somewhere else and it turns into Yellowstone or whatever. Those people generally will remember you and will come back and they'll be hungry now. They'll be like, I could kick myself for letting that one go. They're not going to say that to their bosses, but they'll say that to you, be like, we have to work together. Yeah. So even if you don't end up selling the thing or getting attached to the job that you're in there pitching for, you could walk away with like a cool relationship or a future project.
Yeah, I think we always say that too. Like sometimes it's not about the thing, it's about the thing you're not even aware of. It's
Yeah.
the project you're not even aware of when you're sitting in that room. And if you're selling yourself well, even if they don't want that particular show, it can often lead to something else. I think that's really good to keep in mind.
Well, and it's all a relationship game. It's so much of this career is a relationship game. And yeah, to your point, like you pitch to someone and 5 years later you come in with another pitch, they'll have some recollection of you. Like, if you're seeing, the same people you're pitching to every 2-3 years, you form a kind of relationship. They're heightened moments, pitches, and you remember a lot of the execs who stay at the same place or move to a new place.
Yeah.
Like, we've become friends with a lot of the people who hear pitches over time, and it's pretty cool. Like you become part of the community in this. It's almost like a hazing process where you become part of the community.
I know we pitched the same executive at Netflix like 6 times, and we're 0 for 6 with her, but she really likes us. I know she does, and for each one of those projects, it just wasn't quite right. But I feel like she's always excited to hear from us and what we're pitching next. So it's
Fun.
it's fun. It's tough, and you only need one thing we always tell ourselves is you only need one. You don't need if you pitch 6 networks and you get a single bite, that is fantastic. And
that's a sale.
That's a sale. It's a binary thing. It's either a 1 or a 0, and you either sell it and it stays alive or it doesn't sell. And it's obviously better if you get 2, because then you can, terms can change. It can be maybe, move from a development project to kind of something that is, if they buy or commit to production or, that's a lot better. And sometimes a competitive process will allow you to, not just get a better deal financially, but get a more secure,
closer to being a show.
Yeah, closer to being a show where it's not, if you have one buyer, it's usually a development deal. Okay, we'll pay for a script. We'll pay you to write it. We'll do, 4 rounds of the script, and then we'll decide if we're going to make your show or not. But if you have a more competitive situation, you can, kind of essentially, a straight to series sale is kind of the thing you really want is,
that sounds nice.
Yeah, that they're going to pay you to write the script, but they're also committing to making this series. And that's the biggest prize.
Nice. Yeah. I think the only time we've had a competitive, like a bidding war is the thing that Project Stacy brought out and pitched. Stacy's a much more comfortable performer. She came up as an actor, and she crushes. She crushes pitches. She's funny and herself. Whereas I'm kind of like this like anxious mess, which is kind of myself. But Stacy's so naturally good at it, and that was the first time I think ever we've had multiple offers on something.
It's true. It's true. We had
awesome.
On Waco season 1, we had, if not 2 offers, at least 2 interested parties, and enough to make the sale to Paramount Network, one that was a series, straight to series. So we did have a series commitment on a limited series for that show. So
That's awesome.
That was good.
That was.
It kind of gets you through the pilot writing process a lot faster if you have a serious commitment, because you're kind of opening a room right away, and you kind of, shave, 6 or 8 months off the process, which is great.
You guys want to jump into the nitty gritty? Tell people what it's like, what to expect?
Real quickly, the question I get asked so often, I think, is,
of course,
how do you get the pitch? How do you, how are you able to secure a pitch meeting with a network or a studio? And that's, maybe something we could spend a few minutes talking about, because that is tricky.
That is tricky.
They don't have any kind of like website you could just fill something out as a blind submission and they say, sure, come on in. It's not quite like that.
You may need an agent, manager, somebody, like that, or a producer attached, or
some gatekeeper.
Gatekeeper.
Agents and manager are great at this. But also if you don't have representation, but you have this great idea, I think my recommendation would be to go to, television producers, production companies, studios, and partner with someone, that does have that kind of relationship with the networks who, will be able to set up pitch meetings and will be able to, kind of give you some credibility in the eyes of the network, because they just don't have kind of a blind submission for anyone to come in. And I think that can really help.
Yeah.
Drew, would you cold call them? Say it's like, oh, I want to get in.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Banks Brownstone. They do lots of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Just give them a call and see if their receptionist will listen to a little pitch.
Yeah. Again, the agents and managers are super helpful in that regard. It is so tricky if you're not, if you don't have representation, it can be hard. I would, try anything you can at cold call. Do you know anyone who works there that you could slip them, a draft of what you're working on or whatever? Like, you just kind of need that partner to be able to kind of, schedule all the pitches and get that access.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So trying to find a manager and, query letters, cold calling managers, I'd say, is a great path, or agents. Like to be honest though, I spent a decade sending query letters to agencies and stuff and got nothing until, our movie, The Poughkeepsie Tapes, did well in a film festival, and suddenly, that changed, but it's hard. It's hard getting an agent, a manager, that's a hard thing. And just harder than I thought, it would be. And and then, and then it clicks, there's also producers, anyone, who would give it a read, an open read, is helpful. And that can be helpful to be in LA for that, for that reason. At that point in your career, just to meet people randomly in Los Angeles, you never know who might open a door.
That's right. And managers are usually more accessible. If you're just starting out, managers are significantly more accessible than the agents are. And usually people find management before they find an agent, generally.
So let's talk through the process. Let's talk through, what it's like, what the actual physical process, what it feels like, what it looks like, just so, I really honestly didn't have a very clear sense of what a pitch even was when I went to do my first pitch, and it was horrible. It was truly one of the most humiliating moments of my life.
I think we got to roll it back. I think we got to talk about preparing for the pitch, right? Because you don't just go in there with 5 minutes of prep. You've been working on something. You've got to, that could be a whole separate topic, so we don't have to get super into it. But I think you're preparing what you're going to say. Yeah. You probably have something written down. You've probably rehearsed it a lot. I will say one thing that I really quite like to do. So far, I've done mostly Zoom pitches, so I'm able to actually bring up my Word document and literally just read it, making sure that my face can be seen, but I don't care if I can see my face, so I can just read off the thing. But one thing I like to do to make it seem natural to segue from topic to topic or from chunk to chunk, I actually write those segues out in a way that makes them seem kind of natural. Like, hey, we've told you what an amazing true story this is. Now we're going to tell you how it's going to be an amazing, season of television, something like that. Then, kind of, hey, we're going from point A to point B. I'll actually take those segues, put them in all capital letters, and put them as a header on top of that paragraph chunk. You know what I mean? So that, say I start having panic, say I start being like, oh God, where was I? I know where I am. It's right there in capital letters. It's easy to find to move on to the next thing. You could take that as a printed sheet with you. You'll also probably, and again, we don't have to get too far into it because this could be a whole separate topic, but chances are you've prepared some visuals, whether it's, that you're going to do it live and you have like a visual deck or something. You guys know more about that than I do, or you're doing it via Zoom and you've got sort of like a PowerPoint presentation or something that somebody's helping you run cool visuals of things you've pulled from the internet or, famous actors that you're gonna be pitching your characters. And you have photographs of famous actors as if to imply like, of course, Will Ferrell can't wait to be on my project. Whatever. Yeah.
I gotta say, Zoom pitching is so much better than in-person pitching for so many reasons. But one of the reasons is the technology as far as sharing any visuals. I swear to God, like every single one of these boardrooms is like the glitchiest tech environment. You go to, Amazon or something. It's like, you guys are a tech company and we can't get the screen to work. Like, oh my God. And without fail, you spend 20 minutes of like the whole meet and greet time is like me in the corner trying to like figure out, how to plug into their system, and then it doesn't work. And then they're just like,
Ends
okay.
up everyone crowding around your iPad.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
What I mean?
Exactly. Like, I'll just email it to us later. Like, it just really messes up the flow.
It was part of my flow.
The flow is just destroyed. But I swear, if you do 10, I remember doing 10 pitches on Waco, and every single one of them had a major tech issue.
Every single one of them. And it was like, we'd show up half an hour early to make sure the tech worked. And then they'd be like, oh, Joe is dialing in from, Seattle. Like, and we'd be like, oh, how are we going to have them watch it? It'd always be something, or just, we don't have any connectors for anything. Nobody knows how to use it.
We can't get a hold of them. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
It was just, So at least on Zoom, you have some control over the technology, and the presentation just tends to be a lot smoother on Zoom.
This sounds ridiculously obvious, but I would also say, and again, not to get too much into the prep, because we could do that as a separate thing, but if you are pitching on something that somebody else owns, like meaning, hey, they're going to turn this children's book into a movie, and they're going to be seeing all sorts of people to pitch on it, and you're one of those people, read the material. If it's a podcast, listen to it. If it's a show, watch it. If it's a book, read it,
Yeah. No,
I don't think everyone does that. And they should.
Yeah,
they should. Yeah,
and it's probably a safe assumption that at least one person you're pitching to, probably the decision maker, has not read, has no idea who you are, has no idea like what the project is, even if they own it. Like, they haven't read their own book. You know what I mean? Like, it's, like Drew and I used to joke, like, oh, we're making a living like selling people what they already own.
Yeah.
We did that once. We called the studio and be like, you guys own a book that we love. And they're like, we do. They had no idea. Yeah, they had no idea. It was even in their library.
But even like, quarantine, they had a found footage thing, but they didn't understand necessarily what that was. We're like, here's how this is going to look, because it was, pre-Cloverfield, like, it was like, this is but we got it because we were already kind of in that space. And,
well, they owned Rec, but they hadn't seen it.
That's right. That's exact.
Yeah.
That's
so they owned
like
something that they literally.
Yeah, they had like a 1-minute teaser or something they had seen, and that was it.
Which Doug and Roy must have pitched the shit out of that thing.
Yeah, totally.
Kudos to them. There's a reason they
totally
roll around in money.
Yeah, totally. Let's talk through the process. So you show up, you go to a front desk somewhere. You go find the offices. I'd recommend using the restroom before checking in instead
Show
of doing
up
that
early.
after.
Parking is often hard.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's true.
Especially
be
in LA.
polite to everyone. Don't be a dick to anyone. You don't know when you're going to be overheard. I mean, that should just be in general, but you know what I mean? You don't know who is sharing the restroom with you, so just be nice.
Well, and assistants will tell, we've had like auditions where, people are auditioning to do a role in something, and then the assistant comes in after a person and is like, that person's a total asshole. Please don't cast them.
Wow.
And you're like, oh, they did great in the audition, but they were like super mean. Like, they rubbed someone so the wrong way just in the hallway that you're like, well, that's going to be a problem. Like, especially you cast them in a TV show. That's a problem. Like, to Drew's point earlier, like, there's many reasons to say no, and a personality conflict can be one of them. If you're nice and, like, not snapping at the receptionist, even if you're stressed out, even if you're worried, like, be nice, be nice to everyone, because you don't know. Like, it may be the owner of the studio's daughter who's working the front desk, or this could be the head of a studio in 2 years. And you know what? They'll remember someone who was mean to them on their way up. It's all a relationship game. Everyone in that building is a potential friend to you in your career. And
if you're stressed out and you feel like biting people's heads off and stuff, which it's understandable, the stress is understandable, it can be nice to pre-plan your reward. These things are difficult, and and you can't control the outcome. You can't be like, I'm definitely going to get this job. You can't control that. You can control your prep, but you can also think about like, oh, after this, I'm going to go meet a friend for a drink. I'm going to get a massage. I'm going to whatever, you can pre-plan your treat. I got one of my first pitches I ever did. I was so nervous for it. And John and my kids bought me this ridiculous zip up, full length, hooded plaid pajama set as like you did it. Here's some ridiculous pajamas. And for years I would, wear those pajamas and think about the job that I did not get, but that I did a good job pitching.
Yeah, Drew and I, our first time we pitched to a studio head, it was again quarantine, and we brought it into Screen Gems and we pitched it. And it was terrifying. And it was kind of like, we didn't think it was an actual pitch. We kind of just thought it was a meeting. And then suddenly they're like, okay, pitch it. We're like, oh shit, okay. Well, thank God, just in case, we brought all our stuff because that ended up being the buyer. And it was super nerve wracking, but we delivered, and we did our part. And then we left, and my thing is always I drink way less coffee on days when we're pitching or public speaking, and then my reward to myself is always like, I'm gonna get a big coffee after that. And so we Drew and I went to Starbucks, and our cards bounced because we couldn't afford 2 coffees. Like, we were so broke. We couldn't afford 2 coffees, It was so sad.
We needed that job, yeah.
Yeah, we needed that job. It was a real burn the boats moment. Okay, so you check in with them. They may say, do you want a water or something? You want a tea or a water? I try to have nothing open topped. Because I'm a spiller. I'm a nervous spiller sometimes, and nothing derails your pitch like, becoming like a Chevy Chase, SNL sketch,
I'm the opposite. Yeah. I need to have water there. So I'll just bring mine with me and say, oh, no, thanks. I don't need your bottled water, whatever. But I will get dry mouthed out of nervousness. So I do the opposite, where I make sure I have a fluid.
Yeah, that's good. And then, the other producers, anyone on your side of the table, other producers, right, like anyone who's attached to the project will show up, and you'll all sort of wait in the lobby together and chit chat, nervously. Like I tend to kind of like sometimes pace around by myself, a little removed. Like sometimes certain chit chat makes me feel a little crazy. Sometimes when someone shows up and they're like, rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat, here, here's all the things happening in the, like sometimes that makes me feel a little nutty.
A lot of times they're not going to be the one talking. You are. So they're not necessarily thinking about, they can go on and on about the 405 or,
It's like talking to your field goal kicker before they line it up for the winning field goal, about traffic and about, the presidential election or something, like you just leave them alone, just.
That's so good. I love that analogy. And, okay, and then once all your people are there, they'll call you back. Wait,
set up. What do you wear? What do you wear?
I usually just wear a button down or something like that, and
it's good to be comfortable. I think it's LA, so it's not very formal, but I think personally, it's good to be you're probably in a boardroom at Fox or, Sony or something. And like, these are real companies where they actually dress up for work. So, it can be helpful to be not in a t-shirt, I think personally, but
buttons.
If you're a great writer,
come down to this, buttons.
Yeah. If you come in with a hoodie and that's your what you're most comfortable in, and like, it's not a faux pas necessarily.
But to be respectful, like I think sometimes people are like, oh, it's Hollywood, I'm going to dress like, I guess dress like yourself. What are you presenting? Like Drew and I think tend to try and present ourselves as responsible professionals, so I think we'll show up, in a polo or something like,
not a jacket though.
Not a jacket. A pro tip right here. I once all my button downs were dirty except this one. It was wool, and I was like, oh, it looks good. It doesn't make me look too chunky. And so I put on this wool shirt, and then the room was a little warm, and suddenly I just started overheating, and it led to like a full emotional meltdown, or like, oh my God, I'm pouring sweat. Like, it was one of the worst pitches. It was, for me, a nightmare. And I was like, oh, never again. I will never wear a warm shirt to a pitch. I'd rather be a little chilly than like overheating.
Yeah.
And so now I think a short sleeve shirt is fine. Like a polo or something is fine. Something like that. But yeah, that's us.
I would say for a woman, probably a good idea not to be too sexualized. You know what I mean? Like keep your cleavage to yourself for the day, that kind of thing. Or like, the level of tightness or the level of cleavage or the level of heels. Like if you're going in to pitch for something as a writer or a writer-director, I wouldn't lead with that. But, look nicer than like, for example, right today, and you'll see this when you go to YouTube to see how good looking we are. Like I'm wearing a tie-dye t-shirt. I wouldn't do that. I'd wear something, but I'd wear the equivalent of, good jeans, good boots, something with buttons. Maybe it's shiny. I don't know. I'm the worst.
Stacey came home one day and she's like, I've had an epiphany. I know exactly how I need to dress from now on. I need to dress just like Larry David. I was like, that's funny. That's an interesting, like not, where I thought you were going with that,
I got a whole set of Target pants. They were very inexpensive. Goodfellas Target pants. I got them in all the different colors. And then I just wear a t-shirt. It's perfect.
Yep.
Well, I think one thing to note too on what you're wearing and is just the audience of the pitch is making a determination as much on the content of what you're pitching and the idea of the show as they are on what you will be like as a partner for 5 years, and whatever that means to you, in terms of professionalism or, just, seem like a good person to be around versus difficult or, ornery or something. Like they are a lot of no's, I think, come out of like, love the idea, but just don't really want to, spend 5 years with that person. And I think that's something to really think about is that's as much of their determination as anything.
Not as much Ed Hardy. Lay off all the Ed Hardy. Maybe you shouldn't be a man.
Unless that's your gig, that might be your, your.
That's a good point.
Like I do think there's a certain branding that happens with clothes that, like
good point.
Yeah, if you're pitching something in that style or that world, like I don't know, that's valid. But yeah, you want, ideally, like you want them to want to invite you to a barbecue someday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, or to go to the dozens of, notes calls and stuff. Like, you don't want to show up and be like, if they're like, oh, what could be cool is, a little this, like if you jump right to, I've been thinking about this for years. Like there's no idea you'll come up with. I haven't already thought of and rejected. Like if you're that guy, it's just never, you're not going to sell this thing.
So collaborative, right from the get-go.
Yeah. Collaborative and kind and open and just having a conversation. The more conversational, the better, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And the more like that small talk at the beginning of the pitch with the actual buyers, I think like embrace that. Like, if they're, not rushing you along to get to the pitch so they can get out of there and they're asking you, where you live and if you have kids and all that stuff, like, really, spend the time in the small talk zone with them, as much as you can, because they're trying to get to know you and what you're about and, what's important to you and, what kind of person you are. And I think that's a really important part of the pitch that isn't really part of the pitch, but it is. And that's something not to, ignore or sell short on that front.
Yeah. We got that advice early on. Like, don't start the pitch until they say like, okay, well, let's hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't leap right to like, okay, you ready? Like if they want to be human beings for a little while and connect with you as a human being, don't leap over that. That is a really critical, piece
Smart.
of this.
Yeah, they're asking you those questions for a reason. Yeah, they really are. It may seem like small talk, but they're actually, trying to get to know who you are. And I think that's really, really important.
I feel like it can also, if you can remember the details they said, not to be manipulative, but it can lead to pleasant follow-ups. You don't want to follow up. It's not like you've had one pitch with somebody and all of a sudden you're sending them an email a day. That would be insane. But if you want to, like I've definitely done it where in the small talk, the person says something like, oh, I can't wait for this movie to come out. I love rom-coms. And then it comes out a week later and I see it and I send them a thing like, you were right. It was so good. Whatever, like a little pleasant follow-up, maybe one nothing
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And then, and you can also, I like to write things down afterward. I have a bad memory, so I'll write down what the person was like, what we talked about, just a little bit. And then, if you see them again in a couple of years, you can, bring something up.
Yeah, that is really helpful. I try to do the same thing, put some of those personal details in my contact in my computer just so I can, come back to it at a future date, because it's hard. When you meet a lot of people, it's hard to keep everyone straight.
It is. It is. One other thing, too, that can be really helpful is whoever helped you set the meeting, whether it's an agent, manager, producer, if you could ask them to find out, or have an assistant, have someone find out who you're going to be pitching to specifically.
Oh.
And if you, then look up, this person's name and the network, you will usually be able to get a bio of them online and get some sense of who you're pitching to. Like it does a couple things. It humanizes them in your own mind. You can, know a little bit about something. And there might be, certain connections that you're like, oh my God, they went to the same college I went to, or they went to, they're part of this thing this charity I love, or, whatever. Like there might be something you realize, that, connects the two of you. And, that can be a part of the humanization, I have to say one of my realizations over the course of this has been, when I go into a pitch, like, please think I'm good at this, please, when I go in seeking approval, I get quite stressed out. When I go in seeking connection with the people, like, hey, I'm here in these people's lives for an hour. Like, I'm going to try and connect with them and just have a human experience with people I don't know. When I'm focused in that direction, it tends to go a lot better. And I frankly enjoy the process a lot more myself.
Sounds much more relaxing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just talking about the vibe of the pitch, we find the most relaxing versions of these are the ones where it does become more conversational with the buyer, where they start, sometimes they'll ask a question and you may have that in your pitch, but you're not, you're 10 minutes away from that. And you're like, oh, this is my outline and this is my order. And I don't want to stray from that because that's what I prepared. And then they say, well, what about this thing? And like, instead of saying, oh, I'll get to that, just, I think embrace the shuffling the deck a little bit and answer that question, then be like, oh, we're going to get to that. But, since you asked, let's talk about that. And then try to, in your head, go back to kind of where you left off. And sometimes earlier in our career, that would stress us out if someone kind of threw a curveball in the middle of the pitch that forced us kind of off the outline. But with some experience, I think we learned that is the best version of the pitch. When they're engaged and they're asking you questions, even if it's like throwing your outline right out the window, those are always the best pitches. The worst pitches, in my view, are the ones where you just literally go through your outline exactly rehearsed, and you just have a bunch of eyeballs blinking at you the whole time without a single question and without a single comment. Those are really stressful because you really feel like you're on stage. You're feeling the audience straight right across the table from you, just staring at you. So try anything you can to kind of evoke a conversational feeling in the pitch. I think is really super helpful.
That's great.
I go for more the razzmatazz. Like, I'm putting on a little show. Here's my little show. So you saying that, I'm like, no, don't talk, no. One time I went in, I pitched something twice. I went in, it was like a general that led to me sort of throwing out an idea. And in the room, we yacked about it. And then she said, well, bring it back when it's fully developed. So like a month later, I brought back the fully developed thing. And I got the advice, or maybe I gave it to myself, of like, she'll have forgotten, take her through all the steps again, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm saying some of the things I said a month ago. I'm pitching some of the same things. And she's like, yeah, no, I remember that. I'm like, oh, no. Oh. I should have embraced that more casual, conversational, but yeah. That's great advice, but I have to tell you, I don't like that advice.
I know, it's hard. John and I usually have kind of a system where if a question, gets the curveball comes, midstream, John will chase that curveball and answer all the questions, and I'll kind of flag where we were in the pitch, so I can kind of
I love that.
Bring us back around at some point and be like, okay, we kind of skipped over some thoughts we had about the tone of this piece, and we'd like to make sure to go back to that. You kind of find your way back to where you left off, and then you can kind of know what you've already covered that you can skip over and just. But it does require you to go off script and kind of but if you can kind of come in and out of your script a little bit. in those kind of pitches, but the energy of that room when they're asking a ton of questions is just great. Now, on the flip side, we once had like someone who was on our side of the table, who was a producer, who kept like jumping in and taking it wildly off course and into like deeper sections of the pitch, and just kind of someone who just talked. And that was very challenging. And we had to have like, a conversation, internally after, saying, hey, that's not really helpful when you do that. And, so like that, that wasn't helpful, but that was kind of coming from within, from within. Self-inflicted. Yeah. And it was different. It would happen like two different pitches, and it was totally different both times. Like, oh my God, I can't track it. And
then we were getting, feedback from the buyers like, oh, they like it, but they felt like it was a little scattered. And we're like, yeah, because we're not allowed to,
with
like,
us. Yeah.
Like, dude, I know we're not like perfect pitchers, but like, give us a chance to get through it. And, and so I think sometimes those conversations, and Drew, as you were saying, like, oh, sometimes they ask a question, we veer off course. In my mind, I was like, oh, Drew will get us back. Like, that's exactly, I'm like, I love the wild styling, just like riff, talking through stuff and just going all over the place. Drew, you're better at like remembering to get back to like, I don't know, Drew tends to, be more disciplined than I am in that way.
I think I'm naturally more like you, Stacey. Like I want it to be orderly and like
But I wrote this.
Yeah, but I wrote
this. I worked so hard. Look at this.
But man, we had one pitch that was the studio was with Fox was the studio, and they had convinced us to kind of basically write the pilot in a pitch, and kind of pitch the whole pilot kind of scene by scene by scene. And that was excruciating. It was like an hour-long pitch, and it was just John and I bouncing back and forth, going through the whole pilot scene by scene by scene. And it did ultimately sell. So like it worked, but I found those like on the morning we had a pitch. I remember one day we had two of them. I was like, oh my God, I just can't. I don't even know if I'm going to live through this day. I just can't wait for this day to be over. And
but it was the second one of those that day, right? The second one of those is the one that sold, because it was like our stress had just been exhausted.
Yeah,
we're like,
it's true. That was. We were kind of just loosened up, but
I give up.
Sometimes you're 5 minutes in, and John and I ping-ponging back and forth. I'm like, oh my God, no one here is listening to anything. They've all tuned out, and we have like 40 minutes to go.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about weird listeners.
Yeah,
weird.
Didn't you guys have somebody on the floor?
No, that was we had in one of our early pitches, our manager at the time said, just so you know, this person may get up and go check emails mid-pitch, may like read, like do other stuff, like just keep going. Don't worry. That doesn't mean anything. That's just how they are sometimes. And I had a friend who had a pitch with a high-level, director, and he was told like, hey, just so you know, like there's a chance the director, while you're pitching may, pick up a guitar and lay on the floor and strum the guitar. Like, just keep going. Just pretend like that's not. And I mean, God love the assistant for giving the heads up on that, because I could see being in there and being like, what the hell? Like, is this a cruel joke? Like, what is this? And, he sold that, and we sold the one, with the, and, it's...
Oh, don't be worried if you get bad energy too. I shouldn't even say bad energy, but skeptical energy, or if the people either during it or afterwards seem to be poking holes into what you're doing. Like, are you sure? Is this too that? Is it too cartoony? Is it too burr? Like, I think we said that in a recent episode, that a lot of times it's when they're asking difficult questions and pushing, that means they're actually interested. They are actually kicking the tires because they're thinking about it. And the person who tells you, that was fantastic, we love it, it's probably not going to lead, maybe it's going to lead to a sale, but probably not.
Yeah, often the death knell, is when they're like, you pitched that great, really well done. You're like, oh, that's dead.
That's a no.
That's a no, most likely. And here's the ironic thing is like when I'm honest with myself before pitches, I'm like, I'd rather do a great job pitching and feel good about myself and have it not sell than fumble a pitch and have it sell anyway. And I know that's so wrong. That's like obviously like the wrong priority. And yet at the same time, emotionally, that's what actually I feel like going into these is, you know, I'd rather do my part well and have the outcome not what I want.
Interesting. Yeah.
I do get that.
And then, you know, at the end of the pitch, you know, there's a world in which they throw in some like, have you considered, you know, doing this as a, you know, present day story, not set in the, you know, 5000 BC. And you might be like, well, but that's the point of the show is it's set in 5000 BC. Some of those things, you know, in that circumstance, that might be worth saying, you know, if that's actually the case. And sometimes like, yeah, we considered it like, if it's honest, you know, we considered that this is the reason we chose that time period. I think it's worth having an open conversation. And if you're like, well, actually the time period is not that important. The importance is the character's journey. And so we could make it present day, but I don't know, like
you could probably split the difference and reiterate what you love about the choice you made, but express that you're open-minded to it of like, the thing we loved about the 5000 BC is just that it's kind of gritty and raw and real, and it's an interesting space that not people don't really know about but are fascinated by. But we could sort of take, you know, that's an interesting idea, what you said about the present. Like, I wonder if we could take some of that same feeling and bring that into the present, you know?
Yeah.
That's good.
That is good.
You could also, along those lines of that kind of language, that sort of collaborative, hey, I'm going to be cool to work with, and we are, in fact, going to be making this together language. You guys have said to me that in pitches you like saying, and it's something I've adopted from you, using language like, we see this as a, what's the other one? We see this as a, we love the idea of blah, 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 blah. So that's not saying, that's not absolute language. It's not saying this is a dark comedy about, you know, pickleball. It's saying, we love the idea of this being a premium, elevated, dark comedy about pickleball. We see this as a, you know, so it's saying that you've got a vision and you're confident, but it implies that it's a flexible vision and that there's room for them, you know, it's basically expressing the truth, which is, hey, this is still just an idea. This is not, you know, it's not a complete thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a conversation, not an ultimatum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like this must be, you know, bold. This must be, you know, like if you show up,
it's not
like
a
that guy.
manifesto. Yeah,
it's not a manifesto. All right, well, let's in summary, like.
Oh wait, I have a couple. No, I have a couple more questions.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry.
How long?
Well, how long for the pitch?
Yeah.
Less than an hour.
Less than an hour. Yeah, closer to a half hour if you can be there. And
20 to 30.
30.
30.
Yeah.
And then you're going to inevitably spend another, 20 minutes on top of that 30,
Yeah.
And
The whole thing is going to be 1
and
hour, but that's with the chit chat and the questions.
the questions afterwards. Totally.
Yeah.
And if you, visuals do, help so much in terms of trying to convey what you think the show will look like. And I think trying to, as much as you're kind of putting their head into the story, yes, but also into like, what does the show look like? What will the experience of watching it be like? That tends to be a real good conversation part of the pitch when you start talking about the visuals and, what inspirations you have for the visual, the visual look and feel and color and shooting style and all of that can really help put them into the experience of watching the show. And that's, I find, to be like the best conversational part of the pitch typically.
Yeah.
Who are we just talking to who was talking about Craig Brewer, who is a recent guest of ours, wonderful guest, and saying that he played music during his pitch?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he said it himself. It was somebody else we just had a meeting with.
Hulu was talking about, we just, we had a pitch with him. And he was playing music to give a vibe of like...
Yeah, and it worked.
Yeah.
And it worked, and they bought it. And, it's one thing if you're Craig Brewer and you're like, okay, he's got a whole vibe. Like
he's
known
known for music. Yeah.
He's known to these buyers, very specifically. Like if you're showing up and you're going to reinvent the wheel with a pitch, like it could work. It could work. And that could be a great way to go. But, just gimmicks generally can... we've heard of pitches though, where people are playing characters and doing things like that. Like we've heard of people try all kinds of things and some of them really work and become like, oh my God, these people are amazing pitchers. If you have a 2-hour pitch, don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
You won't get called back for a second pitch. Really time it out. Like do it in your garage or in your, time it out. Make sure, oh, it's 2 hours, but it's so good. They will never have you back. It's I don't know. It's important to play the long game.
And if you have material, like we had one limited series that we had kind of a fairly decent breakdown of all 8 episodes of what each of the episodes would be like. And it was in our series document that we were giving them. So we didn't, in the pitch bother to go through like, okay, episode 1, this is what happens. Episode 2, like you'll lose them pretty quickly. It's like, but mention, hey, in the series document, we took a crack at, breaking the 8 episodes and what each one would be about. And of course, when we get in the room, things might change a little and, we're open to, changes, but, just to give you a sense, it's in there. And I think just alluding to what, might be in the information that you've given them, any written word you've given them to consider is worth mentioning, but you don't need to, double down on all of that in the room.
Cool. All right. So, talk through the pitch process today. And, it's a difficult process. It's, if you're a writer, you're probably introverted. It's going to be a bit of a stretch, potentially, unless you, came up as an actor or something and love it. But even still, like it's a stretch, and it's very rewarding and pretty necessary. And
it's necessary.
Yeah. It's a skill worth cultivating, even if it's not, something you love. You'll get better at it. And I'll say tip of the week: don't wear a hot shirt. Do you guys have one? You guys want to throw in a tip of the week?
Get plenty of sleep before those days, because
oh, that's great.
Sometimes you'll be tempted to like, oh, I'm not quite done rehearsing and I'm still kind of working on it and I'm going to stay up late, and that's always a mistake. Get a lot of sleep. Come very well rested. Yeah.
Mine is congratulate yourself and reward yourself. Really, like when you leave, go to the bathroom, whatever, a private moment, like literally pat yourself on the back, literally give yourself a hug and give a little triumph arms and give yourself a high five and just say you did it, because nobody else is gonna. And give yourself a little, if it's a hot coffee or a glass of wine or a hot bath or whatever it is, give yourself a little treat to look forward to afterward, because, you deserve it just for getting out there and pitching.
That's great. Yeah. And next week we'll get more into like what the contents of a great pitch typically look like, and kind of provide some insight on that front.
If you like our show, please consider taking a minute to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. And please tell a friend about us. And I don't know, I heard we're doing well on TikTok, so do that if you're young. TikTok us. That all really helps us find our audience. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much. See you guys.
Bye.